Hi, I'm Owen Charters and CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada, and it's great to be here at this Frank Talk. Looking forward to talking to you briefly today about what's going on with the nonprofit sector and government, and also a lot about what I think is not working. So let me tell you a few things about what I think is broken these days. A couple of things have happened during the pandemic. One, we've been a sector under pressure. We've been a sector trying to figure out what we need to be doing, trying to figure out what we need to do to support communities, and what kind of help we need to do that work. And what it's turned out is that it's been lots of great sympathy and empathy from government to hear about what's needed, but we're not seeing the dollars come through. Some emergency fund pieces have come through for sure, but nothing that I think really keeps organizations open and sustainable. We've also seen, unfortunately, the issues with We Charity that have taken up way too much media and press in terms of talking about it as an organization that I think some Canadians worry about may be the example of how charities actually operate in this sector. Not great governance, and all kinds of other problems in terms of sole sourcing and just huge amounts of money going to organizations that are too close to politicians. And lastly, not enough engagement and consultation with the sector whose very role is to try and bolster communities that are being hit so hard right now. And so what we're seeing is just lots of organizations that I think are suffering and not enough conversation about how we can help them and how government can help us. This all comes, of course, because of, sorry for the brief history lesson, I'll be fast, the fact that this sector has always been an alternative to government, a sector that's not government, but tries to provide some of the services that government either can't, won't, or just doesn't provide. And over time, that's grown up into a sector that in the late 90s really pushed hard to have a relationship with government. We created the Broadbent Report, and out of that came the Voluntary Sector Roundtable, the Voluntary Sector Initiative, and ultimately an accord, an agreement between the nonprofit sector and the government on how we could work with them. We also learned a lot about who we serve, how people work with us, because we were able to get lots of data. So the survey, the Canadian Survey of Giving, Volunteering, and Participating was funded for quite some time, but also there was lots of other research being driven by the Canadian Centre for Philanthropy, now Imagine Canada, and others. And it created organizations like the Human Resources Sector, Human Resources Council for the nonprofit sector. And that was an organization of many labor councils that went out and got data about how this workforce is, how this workforce is often underpaid, and what it takes to recruit and maintain a strong workforce for the nonprofit and charitable sector, the almost 2 million people that work here. Today, all that's disappeared. The last Conservative government got rid of a lot of this, got rid of the data, got rid of the labor sector councils, and unfortunately the voluntary sector accord seems to have just been washed out the door. So we go back to the fact that we're being managed and regulated simply by the taxman, by CRA, and there may be a charitable sector advisory council there, but it's not really about true engagement and understanding who we are as a sector and how we work. This differs from jurisdictions like the UK and Australia, where there's a charity commission whose sole purpose is to really understand the sector, create new definitions of charity, and build and advise the government on how they can work better with the sector. If we don't do that, we're at risk of becoming like the US, where we've seen increasing pushback from politicians who want to take away some of the benefits that charities have right now as they wrestle with increasing deficits. So what do we need? We need a home in government. And let me be cautious about what I mean by that. First of all, the Senate Special Committee on Charities last June, came out with a report, A Catalyst for Change. And of their 42 recommendations, they recommended that there be a home in government for the sector. Now, some of you who've worked with government right now in the last several months seem to feel there's a home because every time we call, we get sent to talk to ESDC, Employment and Social Development Canada. But that's not the home of charity in government. It just happens to be a department that deals with many of the issues we're talking about at this time. What we need is a central agency. We need a commission that can have a line reporting responsibility in the Prime Minister's office, Privy Council office, finance, or even Treasury. Places where there's central understanding of what we do and a broad understanding of our work so that we can talk to not just ESDC, but culture and heritage. We could talk to all kinds of departments that deal with the issues charities deal with. We deal with everything government understands and works with, not just this idea that we're part of the social development of Canada. So we need a home, but we need a home that gives us access, not a home where everything is just pushed down to some parliamentary secretary to deal with every time you make a phone call to government. Next, We need to have a government that understands balance sheet approach to thinking. By the way, that's also a challenge to you and to me and to every charity out there to think more about our balance sheets. Doesn't sound sexy, but it's actually what keeps us strong in times like this. During a pandemic and now a recession, probably the greatest recession we have seen in decades, balance sheets are what keep us going. And we need a government that understands that our balance sheets are built not because of income statements that are built in the for-profit sector by supply and demand, that if you increase supply, if supply is there or demand is there, then supply follows. So that's not how it works in the nonprofit sector. Customers don't come in the door, pay lots of money, and take products out. What we see is we see donors who say, and governments too, that grant us money. And then we see the demand side. The demand side are lots of people who need our services, but the demand and supply side don't mix. And that means we need to teach government about the real nonprofit economics of our sector, which are not like other sectors. And it means we need to build strong balance sheets, be allowed to accumulate the funds we need to get us through tough times like this. Lastly, what we need is we need a government that understands that data is power and knowledge, and that this sector is starved for data. We need data, and we need the government's help to help us get it, to understand impact, to understand outcomes, to understand how we work, how we could be working, to understand what's happening in the 86,000 charities out there, large, small, doing all kinds of things. How many are active, and what kind of active work is that? How much of it is duplicated work? What should we be doing? So it's time to ask for a new relationship with government. And ultimately, I think it's this. We've often been called the third sector, but we definitely can't be second-class citizens. And who needs to advocate for that? Well, we do. We need to stand up and say we need to be at the table. We need to be equals at the table, not asking for the scraps and handouts. What we need is we need a new relationship with government that allows us to have a home that understands the complexity of the sector and therefore teaches government that how they can work better with us. That sole sourcing a contract to one single charity that has some questionable operations to begin with is not good governance. In fact, there's 86,000 charities out there and about 190,000 nonprofits in total who could benefit from a new relationship with government. So thanks for coming to my Frank Talk. You can reach me, my email's on screen, or you can always find me on Twitter. Love to hear more, but ultimately, don't let a good crisis go to waste. It's time for a new relationship with our government. Thank you.